Hey everyone, I hope you're doing great and following the 3H's of the channel. In this video, I have a really crazy encounter from Georgia, and it really made my skin crawl. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. I have a story that I'd like to tell you that happened to me recently. I live in the United States, in the state of Georgia. I live in a tiny city called Dawsonville. I think there's around 3,000 people maximum living there as of 2024, but it could be a little less than that. I didn't exactly go around counting, if you know what I mean. Anyway, to cut to the chase and give you all the goods, there's this place nearby called Dawson Forest that you may possibly have heard of before. It's about a 20-minute drive from my city, but it's home to some seriously crazy rumors that I just could not help trying to check out for myself. I'll give a little bit more background information, and then I'll get into the story. So in the late 1950s, the United States Air Force purchased property inside Dawson Forest and built what used to be a secret research facility. I believe it was called the Georgia Nuclear Aircraft Lab. It's been out of commission for around 54 years, but people who live around this area and who have ventured in the forest always whisper rumors about strange lights and creatures that they've never seen before. I've heard talk of a deer that grew a second head due to the radiation in the area. Back when it was built, absolutely everything nuclear was top secret, especially with the growing tensions of the Cold War. They wanted this facility to be built somewhere that no one would or could snoop around, but this didn't stop rumors from circulating when some locals caught wind of the facility. I'm only 22 years old, but my family have lived here for years and years, and they have all told me all the stories. The rest of the information on this place is available online. You can look up everything that I'm telling you. The place was locked up tight with massive amounts of security, and at the time, you needed clearance just to get anywhere near the place. When they were developing the area for this site, they had to come up with a quick solution for the trees that they were left with that they had to cut down. Loggers, of course, could not get any security clearance to get near the site, and so the people involved there took thousands of dead trees, piled them up, and just burnt them. There are still first-hand witnesses alive today who still live in the city that attest to seeing a giant yellow glow coming from the forest because of this. Because the bonfire was so large, the glow reflected off the clouds, and people miles away could see it, clear as day. It was a secret atomic facility burning as bright as the sun. People thought that it was the end of the world. People back then spread rumors about the place being used to observe UFOs and other alien craft that had been brought from other places around the United States to Georgia for study. The Air Force apparently never really cared about these rumors. This is because they were so far off from the truth that it helped to keep the secret from the public. This is a fact, too. Anyway, I had known about this, and I had heard stories for a fair while, but it wasn't until a few weeks back that I grew especially bored and was looking for something to do. I've always had a love of the outdoors, and have done quite a bit of exploring and hiking in my time. I decided to do some more investigating, and then to go there. So of course, I researched the place extensively online. I look at articles, documents, and all that kind of stuff. I talk to my parents about the place, what they remember, all the local rumors and such. I talk to older people around the neighborhood who I know. I get excited, like really excited. I hadn't been on a hike or explored anywhere in a couple of months, so I knew just how much I was going to enjoy this. I explained the entire story about the area and the facility to my buddy Mark, who is also an avid hiker, and who also accompanied me on treks before. We used to do a lot of urbex when we'd stop by in different, bigger cities. He seemed interested, but he wasn't convinced about the potential for exploring. He says it's probably all just sealed off, and that we'll get there, walk a little ways in, and then have nothing to do. He says he doesn't want to waste an entire day. I'm practically begging him to just give in and say yes. I promise him everything under the sun if the place turns out to be boring. He reluctantly says yes, and I thought, sweet, let's do this. Neither of us have a car, and both of our parents are busy, so we're going to do this old school. The walk was long AF, but we don't really mind. We really enjoy walking, and the exercise is nice. The walk took us like 3 hours. I only realized about halfway through how bad of an idea that it was, but by that point there was no turning back. We reached the entrance to the forest. We're both puffing and panting, not looking forward to the walk back home. We decide to make the most of the daylight that we have and make our way in. The place is completely open to the public now. It's not restricted land at all, aside from the abandoned facility itself, but I'll get into that. Radiation was reported to be above normal background radiation level, but that was in 1997, so I figure it should be okay by now. It would be incredibly stupid for them to open the place to the public if it wasn't safe, so I'm not really worrying about that at all. Mark has a slight interest in photography. It's kind of weird about it though. He prefers taking photos in a retro style on really old cameras from the early 2000s and the 1990s because it's aesthetic, or some other word he used. He has some PowerShot camera thing from 2002. I guess that qualifies as retro now. We get a good ways in and take in our surroundings. The place is actually pretty pleasant. Lots of great scenery, and surprisingly, a lot of animal activity, considering its supposed radiation levels. Strangely though, there's no bird singing or any kind of bird activity at all. It's very weird, considering the place is now supposedly a wildlife reserve. We're starting to lose quite a bit of light by this point. It's definitely not pitch black, but the sun isn't glaring either. I spot some kind of glint in the distance. It's kind of hard to make out, but it looks like some kind of deer. It's not a regular deer though. It's completely white. I'm not talking about like sun-faded fur or a couple of splotches. Every inch on this thing is pure white. This is not the only thing strange about it. It has a third antler instead of two. It looks really malformed, and it's kind of coming out of the back of the deer's head instead of from the top like the other two. My friend tries to capture a picture, but the stupid sound his camera makes startles it, and he only gets a blur as the deer's running away. Definitely very strange, but we decide, whatever, it's a deer. We want to keep exploring. Once you make your way a fair way down the trail path, the old abandoned buildings start to become visible. We also keep seeing dead trees as we move farther into the forest, clusters of them. All the trees around and the rest of the forest are perfectly healthy, but every so often there's just a group of 3 or 4 trees that are stone dead. But we get up to the entrance. It looks like all the entrances to the place have been concreted off. At this point I was thinking that if we came all this way and we just can't get in, I swear. I'm looking desperately around the place for some way to get in. Literally any way at all, but no dice. Mark is pissed. I'm pissed. I decide that we'll just search around some more at some other point, and decide to make the most of our time and explore down another trail and hope that we'll find some sort of way in. We make our way quite far down this trail, quite a distance away from the abandoned facility buildings. But then, we stop dead in our tracks. I say out loud to Mark, "Okay, that's really weird." He just kind of ignores me and goes to inspect it. It's a giant concrete retaining wall, just kind of standing there, almost in the middle of nowhere in the forest. But it also has a large hole in the middle of it. It looks like somebody blasted it with an RPG or used explosives on it. Mark instantly starts climbing through the hole, while I start sprinting toward him to pull him back. I'm yelling at him, calling him an idiot because we shouldn't be screwing around with stuff like this. I reach the hole, but he's already in it. There's a tunnel entrance just right there. Mark is already completely out of sight, and I rush in to try and catch up with him. The tunnel is crude, and there's dirt scattered all around. The smell is absolutely foul. It smells like a combination of bleach and vomit. The tunnel goes on for a ways and opens up into another retaining wall, which also has a hole leading to another series of tunnels. It takes me what seems like forever to get through the whole system, but I haven't caught sight of Mark once since he rushed in. Finally, I see what I think is the exit. Bear in mind, I've had to crawl through these tunnels as there isn't enough headroom for me to stand up. My knees are on fire, and I'm just relieved to be able to rest. As I'm exiting the tunnel, I bump straight into Mark, who is sat motionless on a metallic staircase. I almost crash into him, but I manage to catch myself before I push him over the railing. I start to talk, but Mark immediately jumps toward me and covers my mouth. I'm thinking, yo, what the hell, dude? You just disappeared on me, and now this? Mark just points his finger. I start to look around the room where his finger's pointing to. We're in some kind of concrete room, way underground. I'm not sure exactly how far we are, but it has to be at least 20 feet deep or so, probably more. And the walls. Holy shit. The walls are just absolutely lined with bugs. I'm not talking a few flies here and there. I mean piles and piles and piles of bugs, all bunched up together. A pile of spiders is all huddled together. A pile of abnormally large cockroaches stacked on top of one another, all stretching across the wall. Just loads and loads of bugs. None of the bugs are doing anything though, except for what looks to be vibrating. They are kind of moving side to side in a bunch, but only ever so slightly. The air in the room is pungent. It smells as foul as you can imagine, like someone died and then was left there for hundreds of years. I chalk up the smell to the masses of bugs. There's piles of them writhing on the ground below the stairwell. There's almost no room to move at all. Mark is absolutely shit scared of bugs, so it's no wonder that he's frozen in place. He's shaking as if we were in the Arctic. I can't get a single word out of him. He somehow manages to stabilize himself and not run straight back to the surface. He finally begins to speak. Dude, what the F is going on here? I have no idea what to even reply to him. As I'm searching for the words, he says again, dude, what the F, there's something glowing over there. And no kidding, near the floor, in one of the corners, is another pile of cockroaches, but they're not the color they should be. Their hue is slightly tinted. It's almost kind of a yellowish color on them, and they aren't the only ones either. There's a few other masses of bugs that are ever so slightly tinted with different colors, a slight yellow, a slight orange. The number of bugs must have numbered in the thousands. Also, even though they were vibrating, there was no sound coming from them whatsoever. I'm in the process of standing back and telling Mark that we just need to get the hell out of here before we make too much noise, and we start getting swarmed by hordes of bugs. Mark waves me away and hushes me up before I can say anything. He tells me that he thinks he's found a way into the nuclear research lab. It's really hard to make out due to all the bugs, but there's a very small door, something like a closet door that a maintenance worker would use. Mark is shaking like hell and has a trembling lip, but he tells me that we need to check it out. I ask him if he's absolutely sure, and he tells me to just go and not think about it. Now this next part is a little bit embarrassing, but it was probably the only way that this was ever going to work. Bugs are definitely not my favorite things in the world, but I can handle touching them and them touching me. I walk ahead of Mark slightly while he closes his eyes. I hold Mark's hand, which is slightly behind me, and I sort of lead him with me while he focuses on his breathing. And I already know the comments I might get about that, just save it. I'm walking as slowly and carefully as I possibly can. I don't want to step on any of the bugs and either make them mad or have them make that disgusting sound. Sure, they can't exactly do anything to us, but the prospect of mountains of bugs heading straight for us would probably make Mark kill me. I manage to sort of tiptoe between the mounds of bugs and finally reach the door. Thankfully, it's unlocked, and I open it, and I shove Mark inside of it first. He tells me that he isn't ready to open his eyes yet. He stands by the door, catching his breath. The maintenance closet door is actually a small corridor that leads to a manhole cover at the end. Both of the cover and the walls are littered with graffiti. The graffiti basically tells you to keep out if you don't want to die. One that caught my eye on the wall said, "Entrance to Hell." And I spotted one more that was impossible to miss. Right across the cover, spray painted in red, it said, "Abominations," whatever the hell that means. Mark has calmed down about as much as he ever will, so I lift up the grate and we head down. Underneath is surprisingly boring. There's tons more graffiti telling people to go back, yada yada yada, but that's about it. Pretty much just a straight line tunnel, but the door at the end is something major. Have you ever played Fallout New Vegas? You know where you have those doors that are mechanical or whatever. You know the ones I'm talking about, hopefully. It was exactly like that, except it spanned the whole width and height of the tunnel that made us feel like ants. We walk up to it, and there's a panel or something on the side with some buttons. We think that they're not going to work because this place definitely shouldn't have power for decades. Surprisingly, when playing with the buttons, the door begins to open. It makes this horrid screeching sound as the doors slide away into the tunnels. As soon as the door has finished opening, a steady stream of water starts coming down through the door and into the tunnel. It looks as if the facility had been partially flooded, but not enough to cause any major problems for us, aside from soaking wet trousers. Finally, we head into the place. Both Mark and I are incredibly excited. This is finally the place that we've been looking for. All of my research has actually paid off. There's still water sliding out, which we have to trudge through, but we start exploring the halls of the place. We kind of split up and go into two different rooms across the hall from each other. I can hear Mark stomping around and shuffling papers about. I figure that he's really getting into some secret documents. The place is actually quite disappointing. It seems like they gutted the place when they abandoned it. Most of the windows are sealed up, and any doors leading further into the facility are completely cemented up. It means that we have maybe half of the actual facility to look around, even less if there are any floors that are underneath this one. And then I come across a few boxes of files stacked up in the corner. Most are water damaged beyond all repair. It looks like that they couldn't get everything out in time, or didn't care enough to. I pick up a few documents and skim through them, but nothing too interesting. I say not interesting because I have absolutely no clue what they meant. Lots of talk about a 10 MW unshielded reactor and irradiation. I think they also mentioned something about a bomber that used nuclear power for fuel or something like that. I start to hear more stomping, like aggressive at this point. I can feel the vibrations through the floor. I'm wondering what the hell Mark is doing. And then I hear him scream. I drop the documents to the ground the instant that I hear the scream. I full sprint to the door, and as I'm running out, I collide with Mark, and we both fall to the ground. I don't even have time to ask him what's wrong. He is completely frantic and yells at me to move the hell out of the way. He doesn't even turn to look at me once. He just runs straight back the way we came. I get up and start to chase after him. As I do, I hear more noises from behind me. Stomping noises. The same stomping noises. When I turn around, I can't believe my eyes. Right there, sitting on the wall of the corridor, is an absolutely massive spider. The size I cannot even begin to describe. Unmeasurable. I've seen big spiders before, but this thing had to be bigger than a bulldog, bigger than a large dog breed. I don't even know. It was brown, with a sort of dark yellowish hue to it. It had brownish blotches that ran down its abdomen. I pretty much shit my pants right then and there. I was paralyzed. I thought that if I moved, the thing would charge at me. I stood there for what seemed like hours, watching it contort its freakishly long limbs as it slowly slithered along the wall, out of sight of me. It didn't crawl like a normal spider would. It almost dragged itself along the wall with two of its legs, leaving some type of slime on the wall behind it. Every time it moved, one of its front legs would drag itself and hit the wall. You could feel the vibration through the entire place. Needless to say, I shot out of there. I only caught up to Mark once I reached the outside. I guess the adrenaline was enough for him to ignore his fear. We walked the majority of the way home in silence. After everything had died down, a few days later, I asked Mark what happened. He told me that he kept trying to explore, but kept feeling vibrations that he could feel through his legs. He thought that I was running around or jumping or something, so he peeked his head around the corner. He told me that he looked down the hall and saw the thing emerge from behind a corner, ever so slowly. Apparently, it came out pincer first. They stretched inches away from its face, and he watched as the spidery mass dragged its whole body around the corner, and that's when he screamed. As soon as he let out that scream, the thing started to, well, not run because it couldn't, but it started to drag itself much faster than before. Mark told me he fumbled with his camera and only took a blind picture before his instincts took over and he bolted out of there. Because he couldn't take a proper photo, he only managed to get a picture of one of the limbs. What the hell did we stumble into? So that was pretty crazy, wasn't it? If you liked the story, and you liked my narration and all that stuff, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you would like to donate to the channel, I have a PayPal and a Patreon down in there as well. And as always, if you have a story that you would like to send in to the channel, there's an email down there as well. And with all that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching.